Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome everybody. My name is Alexander Greb and you're listening to Transformation Every Day. Expert insights and stories on SAP and beyond. Today I'm joined by nobody else than Jochen Fischer, founder of NoMonkey, and we are going to dive into SAP security. In a way, this is our Halloween episode because you will hear scary stories that might keep you up at night, but also the insights that help you sleep tomorrow better. Also how to make your SAP landscape the house attackers walk past. So, without further ado, let's get into it. This is Transformation Every Day.
But which is now your club? It is Eintracht or is Hoffenheim? Because after
Eintracht.
our last,
It was just a job.
it was just a job, so no heartfelt things in there.
Hoffenheim. When I did the job at Hoffenheim, actually that was the start. I always wanted to go into SAP somehow, and I was a flight attendant at that moment in time for Lufthansa. Then I worked for an event agency, and Hoffenheim requested someone to be their new mascot. And they asked my event agency if they have someone for that. And I said, yeah, let's do that, because I thought strategically, if you do that, there might be a chance also to get into the SAP environment. And this way I met Dietmar Hopp, I met Gerd Oswald, got that network. I did it for 7 years. I started studying economics, became a corporate student, wrote my diploma for SAP, and then they somehow saw any talent in me and hired me permanently as a key account manager for Deutsche Telekom. And this was my entry within SAP, and everybody in SAP knew that I am the mascot of Hoffenheim. And did that. And I led the club from third league under Hansi Flick all the way into the Bundesliga. And also, walked onto the pitch in the Herbstmeisterschaftsspiel against Bayern München in front of, 80,000 people. And it was streamed into 164 countries. That was amazing.
And you were in costume.
Yes, for sure. I was with the team. I entered with the team on the pitch, and I was sitting there. Then the rest of the match I spent on the T-Home fan couch in Munich, which is right next to the sideline. And I managed to stay there for 18 minutes until someone called that someone should take the Hoffenheim moves away from that T-Home fan couch. But I had to sit somewhere, right?
So you had your part in the rise of TSG Hoffenheim.
Let's say
that be?
I didn't sweat less than the players.
Of course. But was maybe this also a root cause for your profession now, like bringing security, safety, good things to the world based on guilt for being responsible, bringing Hoffenheim to the Bundesliga?
I think it's more a personal thing. I like to make people happy. And when you are in that costume, you don't have enemies. Everybody likes you. Kids, women, men, there's nobody, maybe the opponent fans who are not your best friends. But even with them, they recognize that. And I got applause on that, because I was not just doing that one. I was really pushing, doing the moonwalk, the move. And one really interesting thing against Bayern Munich was I usually always went to the opponent cabin, to the locker, and ask for a shirt if they have a shirt left. And that's why I have 26 shirts in my cupboard, match worn, of huge stars in the Bundesliga. But once I went there against Bayern Munich and the door was closed, and I knocked, and then it opened up, and it was Uli Hoeneß standing in front of me and asking me, "What do you want now?" And I said, I wanted to ask if it's possible to maybe get a jersey, because that's what I always said to every club. I'm usually a Bayern Munich fan. That was really hard for me to say, but I did it. And then he pulled me into the locker room. Around me, 26 naked players of Bayern Munich.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so be quiet, everybody quiet. And they were quiet when Uli Hoeneß says quiet. And then he said, this young man did a fantastic job out there. I looked at him and it is really outstanding, the performance. Now he's usually a Bayern Munich fan. Does anyone still have his jersey left? And then Bastian Schweinsteiger stood up and said, I saw it too. It was amazing. Here's my shirt. Signed it off, gave it to me. And I was like, wow, impressive. And there were situations I have the shirts of Lukas Podolski, René Adler. There are quite cool players there where I have the jerseys. And also, I always was a part of the team of Hoffenheim. I was the same age those days, so I was going out with players and everything. That was an unforgettable time that I don't want to miss, definitely.
I definitely believe so. And this was a great story. And I pressed recording, so this will not get lost. we have Jochen here, no monkey. Jochen Fischer, great to have you. You are one of the most prolific, proficient voices concerning security, safety in SAP systems. Before we go into that thing, first explain why the name, why no monkey.
First of all, thank you for inviting me and having me in that podcast. So No Monkey is a idea that came up from reflecting what I saw in the market, what I learned over the years. So I started at SAP, native SAP, as I just said, worked there. This is where I understood the SAP world. And after 6 years in SAP, I went into the SAP security business, which was a field where not many players were in. And I was responsible for the internationalization of that company who created the first ABAP code scanner in the world, Virtual Forge. And this allowed me to get to every single part of the world doing evangelism about the necessity of securing critical business applications like SAP. And I found out that actually everywhere I go, companies are facing the same challenges. And most of them, they do roles and authorizations and think they do security. That's it. Yeah? But there is so much more that needs to be done. But that's not in the comfort zone of the people. So what they do in the end, quite often, is they throw technology on a problem they don't understand.
That's the usual way to approach things, and not only in security.
Yeah, which can be valid, because if something happens, they can say, hey, I bought the tool. What else should I do?
Yeah.
And then I thought about it and said, this doesn't really make sense. This is inefficient and, especially in the SAP environment, as well expensive. So what you got to understand is there are 3 attack vectors that attackers can misuse: the people, the processes, and the technology. I said they throw technology on a problem they don't understand. So I reflected and thought, hey, we have to start with the people. The people need to understand, and therefore they need to learn. Then they can build the right processes. And in the third step, they can actually pick and choose the right software to support their people and processes, but not the other way around. So that was the core of how we want to think, live, breathe security in general. Not technology first, people first. And what I also discovered, and now we come to the answer to your question, is that typically we've been speaking to SAP people. They understood the code, the vulnerabilities, all the technical aspects, and it all made sense. Yes, we have to do something. But what happened is that they take that information, and most of the times we had evidence by a code scan or anything. They take that information, go to the basement and do the last room and put that information in the last corner, hoping that nobody ever finds it. Why? Because they have enough to do and they're not really proud of their vulnerabilities and the fact that they probably haven't done security over the past years. So what you typically don't see, and I'm now bringing in the picture of the 3 lines of defense: SAP department, IT security department, audit department. What you typically do not see is that SAP people speak about those vulnerabilities. And that is the first line of defense. The second line of defense is IT security. And IT security is most of the times not even connected to SAP. So for them, it's a total black box, and they don't see what is happening in that critical application. By the way, even if they see it, they are not able to understand it because they are not SAP experts, they are IT security experts, and they don't know various terminologies that happen, for example, in SAP. Like, I give you an example: a number range has an overflow. The number range itself is a terminology used only in SAP. This can be a DDoS attack on application level, but the IT security guys, they see number range, so it's just numbers, let them overflow. So this can be very, very harmful. Lastly, the third line of defense is audit. And what does audit typically do? They hire a third party, like NoMonkey or anyone else, or CBS or whatever is around. And then they do a pen test or an application audit. What happens then is they take that information, bring it forward to the SAP guys and give them a timestamp, clean it up, 12 months. Yeah? But really listening in terms of what is necessary to reduce the attack surface or to be compliant due to internal or external regulation is also not possible. They also don't speak Japanese, as we say.
Yeah.
And that is the so-called 3 lines of defense, what the management thinks is in place. And here comes the fourth monkey. I always say what they protect, I leave it to everybody else's imagination, but that's the management. That's the management who thinks they have the 3 lines of defense in place. And that is also the reason why this topic has to be addressed top down and not bottom up. Super important. And having said this, I was thinking, hey, when you think of what is happening in SAP systems, this is too business critical for our world economy to do monkey business. And that's why I named the company NoMonkey.
That's wonderful because, yes, I think everybody knows the kind of 3 monkeys with no listening, no seeing, no talking, and so on. But the analogy is wonderful. And I fully agree that the best possible way to approach this is by an architecture, which is an architecture of security, which is taking to consideration all the factors. And I wonder if you agree that this topic is something which is probably, we have the cloud movement now and so on. And so like these kind of weird installations with the server in the basement and so on, and some cables going around and even maybe outside the building. So perfect angles of attack. That these kinds of architectures, they disappear more and more and more, because people go into the cloud and this becomes more and more professional and so on. So you would think that maybe security, is that really still a topic? With probably many people thinking like, wait, when I buy a cloud suite or something, like, don't I buy security automatically with that?
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much and happy listening.
So in general, I would say security is a topic, and I don't say more than ever because it has always been one. There was just nobody who felt really responsible for it, or it was something that we can do later or postpone. There are different priorities. There's right now no additional budget or whatever. By the way, these are all arguments where the attacker doesn't care at all. If you have the priority, the budget, the resources, you don't want to block silos or whatever, the attacker doesn't care. Yeah. In all those years, I never had an argument which would push back an attacker from attacking. That is super important to understand. Coming back to your question, the cloud will not solve these issues. That is super naive, I would say, to think, okay, I'm going into the cloud, there's a hyperscaler, there's SAP who's taking care of everything. No, there will always be responsibilities. The shared responsibility is a buzzword, which is there, where a lot of companies have not even thought about, okay, what is in my responsibility? What does the hyperscaler do? What does SAP do? What is in my contract? And this is something where actually every corporation should think and reflect also, what are my duties? Because we say hope is not a strategy. You can hope that SAP is doing it. You can hope that the hyperscalers are not being attacked and that they do their duties. But you have to take care of yourself, and what you should do is make it as unattractive as possible for an attacker to attack. And that's why I always also say, when you have done your homework in security, give references, show it. Because imagine you have two houses, house A, house B. House A has a fence, has a dog, has alarm signs everywhere, whatever. House B has nothing. You are an attacker. Which one would you attack?
The easier one, probably.
There you go. For sure, there is sometimes there's also state-sponsored attack where they really go in targeted a corporation or whatever, where they have to try it, and then it's try and error. The inconvenient truth is, being in the SAP security business now for over 15 years, I've seen more than 400 pen tests being executed, and there was not a single customer where we couldn't pull out data, manipulate data, or take control of the entire systems. No matter what size, no matter what location, it was always possible. And that's the inconvenient truth, where you don't have to argue. Can I get in? Yes or no?
Definitely. And I think also, like you stated in our conversation that we had before, and we talked last week at the DSHE in Bremen, where you pointed out that SAP systems are super critical. And even just that is the first reason to take care, because they are the backbone of our global economy.
I agree. Yeah. When you think of what is running over SAP system, for example, 78% of our global car manufacturing worldwide is touching SAP systems. Almost 90% of all produced TVs run an SAP system. And last but not least, and that should be something we all need to worry about, 78% of the global beer production is touching SAP.
Now you got me. I'm all in. Now you got me.
There you go. So there's a reason to protect those critical systems, and not just for the beer, but in general. When attacks on SAPs are being launched, this will have significant impact on our global economy. And it's not like there are no vulnerabilities. This is German quality software, which is secure default. I hear that quite often, especially in the Middle East. So it's German quality software, secure by default. We don't need to take care of this. And then I'm wondering, have you ever heard about our government planes? Or is your S-Class never broken down or whatever? So I'm doing that myth busting and waking people up from that made in Germany is automatically 100% secure and robust. Wrong. Simply wrong.
I think there are no such things as a 100% robust software or anything. But still, what you say, I think we have to create awareness, and the most easy way to create awareness is, and we see that in politics and media and whatever, of course, to scare people. So I think since those things that you are experiencing on a day-to-day basis are hell lot of scary, what are your, let's call it like your top 3 scary stories from a security standpoint, which are really eye-opening?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to emphasize that I don't want to scare people off. That is not my goal to scare them. I want to put them up and make them think from the end. What would be the consequence if I get attacked? What would be the individual consequence for my corporation, for my production? Think from the end. That is super, super important. And I don't want to scare people off. I want to ideally help them understand their risk and give them a positive feeling that we can help them to get it solved. That is super, super important before we tell scary stories. But when you ignore it, there can be a consequence. Yeah?
Exactly.
For example, we did a risk analysis at a huge Swiss company, also listed on the stock exchange, where we analyzed the code, and suddenly we found a hard-coded Gmail address. And on that Gmail address,
in the code,
yes,
in the system.
Yeah, so there was a data loss protection, data loss detection check, where we realized every 4 days before quarter end, financial reports and results were downloaded to that Gmail address. Now the people got a bit nervous in the audience and immediately took the phone and called HR, because you could see it was first name dot last name at gmail.com.
Not even something like seed 0 underscore something, but really first last name.
You could identify that person from that email address. So they asked, who is it? Is that an internal? Is that an external? And then the next surprise came up. It was an internal who left the company 6 years ago. So now imagine what it means when you have 6 years, every quarter end, 4 days beforehand, the financial results of a stock exchange listed company.
Go out.
Jackpot.
And it was all the time and so on. And of course you can do all criminal things with that. Yeah. And this is 6 years.
Yes, and this is not a scary security breach where you shut down the system or whatever. Yeah. This is, first of all, compliance. Yeah, you have a massive compliance issue when this is done, and you do not see or can detect the fact that that person is 6 years out of the company. Also shows that they didn't have any capabilities to detect scenarios like that. Yeah. It is impossible.
Completely defenseless. Yeah.
Yeah, free. This is that was really really eye-opening. Another thing is I would like to emphasize on that as well, because it is something not a lot of people in Europe have heard of. But maybe you remember what happened in New Zealand in Christchurch. There was a bad massacre, you can say. Someone
a shooting. Something like that, yeah.
A riot. And after that, the population of New Zealand decided we want to do a buyback of our guns and rifles that we have there officially. And that was decided. And that had as a consequence that the people who had weapons could offer them on a platform, and weapon dealers make an offer to buy back those weapons. SAP was responsible to build that platform. And they also did it with the existing security knowledge that they have, which was unfortunately not enough. So in the end, thinking from the end, there was the possibility that everybody on this planet could register as a weapon dealer and see who in New Zealand has which rifles where stored. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. That is information which is actually frightening. And therefore, SAP had to excuse themselves in New Zealand and also Australia, because that was a quite big wave. However, in Europe, nobody noticed really about that. Have you been aware of this, Alexander?
Not really, but now when you're saying that, it was in the news. So this is nothing like internal stuff that we're talking about. But
No. You can Google it.
It was in the news. Yeah, you can Google it. That's true. That's true. Yeah. So these things are happening, and they are extremely frightening. I fully agree. But the question is, first, of course, how common are such things? Yeah, because of course nobody really likes to tell these kind of stories, like, oh, I'm attacked 3 times a day and so on. So like that's the first question, of course, that happens. And the second, of course, is like, who are those attackers? Because normally you would say, like, okay, they are either baseline criminals, foreign organizations, state supported by, let's say, some evil states, espionage stuff, and so on and so on. Like, who are these people? Because from my experience, I made the experience 3 years ago with a customer who called me and he said, like, yeah, they had a massive problem. They were attacked. And it was really like in a bad movie. They went in the morning into their offices and it came out. And I think that the hacker, they came via the printers. They managed to get into the system. And when they switched on their computers, they get this kind of screen which said something completely different than they used to. Yeah, like, hello, you've been hijacked and pay and blah, 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 blah. These kind of things. Like, really, like you thought that these kind of hijacking things that would happen to private people. In that case, yes, it happened to a whole company. And they really had for over a year a massive problem, yeah, because forensics were coming there and they had to continue production, but without IT support, really, because they completely isolated, of course, the system. So this is nothing you want to experience in your life, because that was horrific and that was completely threatening to the existence of that company and so on. But like I said, coming back, it's not like, from my experience, I see this every day. So there, of course, have to be unsuccessful attacks. A lot of them probably are unsuccessful. Do you have any statistics about how often this actually happens, that some people try to invade? And who are the suspects?
Yeah, so those attacks happen every day. Every day. We also do some forensics, and we do incidents response in case someone gets attacked, and then it's headless chicken mode. Everybody is running around, and we have to stop the bleeding. And therefore, they ask no monkey to support from a professional perspective. What you need to understand, the attack itself doesn't necessarily need to happen within SAP. But due to the fact that SAP is permanently communicating with non-SAP, and I haven't seen one company who has their interface topology written down in a complete way, and also know how to secure those interfaces properly. These attacks, everybody looks at Microsoft. Usually, they are the first in the field glass to look at. But the attack
from a private user perspective, of course, yeah,
absolutely, yeah, and even from a corporate user perspective, same. But the attack doesn't necessarily need to happen within SAP. Now, who are these people who do those attacks? What a lot of companies and also people underestimate is that still 50% of these attacks come from the inside of a company. These are maybe fired employees who just have the skills to do that, like the example I mentioned earlier, frustrated people, whatever. Or it is just also a lack of knowledge, just vulnerabilities that appear because the people are not trained and skilled enough to do it in a proper, secure way. So sometimes these vulnerabilities don't really rise intentionally. That can also help. Now, when we look at the external point of view, yes, there are state-sponsored attacks. There are script kiddies who just try stuff out that they find in the darknet and exploit. And you have to see, for example, when there's a patch available or because of a new vulnerability, this is actually available for everybody. Everybody knows this is the vulnerabilities. This is how it can be misused. And if companies don't patch immediately, they're extremely vulnerable before that. And
because every patch is automatically the information going out that there's actually a problem. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you look now in how long it takes in average until those patches are completely deployed, if they are sometimes we've seen organizations where nobody takes care of patching at all, which is like really the nightmare of everything. Yeah, so there you can really set the clock when they will be blown up someday. But this is super, super important. Number one advice: patch. Always, as soon as possible. Then you have state-sponsored attacks, like, for example, motivated from China, from North Korea, from Iran. They want to know secrets like production plans. We have been to a car manufacturer doing a pen test where we could see all parts and all car models of the next 5 years in detail. Without having a specific access or whatever. If, for example, Chinese attackers get that information, then you don't need to wonder why some of these Chinese cars look exactly like the German cars do. Maybe a little different, but I'm thinking about the Porsche, the electric Porsche, for example. The model that came from China for a third of the price looks almost identically. Or when you see various other cars, there is something where you see, okay, there is some information that has been flowing up. Then we definitely also have a lot of professional hacking groups that go there. And that leads me to one point which frustrates me, to be honest, a little bit, which is the case of ransomware. Right now, when you read in the press, most of the time you read ransomware. Now, let's look a little bit deeper on ransomware. So ransomware means everything is encrypted. You can't work anymore. In other words, you also can't ignore it anymore because you can't work anymore, right? So
absolutely,
that is the case. So this cannot be ignored anymore. But what people need to understand is that the ransomware, the encryption of the system, is the very, very, very last thing an attacker does to monetize his efforts or her efforts, whatever. This is super important to understand. In other words, the attacker comes, goes, undetected. They take what they want. They come back. They don't say, hey, I was here and I saw X, Y, Z. And by the way, I took whatever I wanted. No, they come and go. They come and go. And the last thing they do to monetize that is encrypt the system. What that also means
so basically you have something like an exploitation strategy happening.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my first step is going like I go in there, I retrieve important data, for example, that I can maybe use for some stock exchange stuff, and information that I can sell and so on. And just the last thing that happens is, okay, and now I want to get money from that company itself. So when you know, or when you have the kind of encryption moment happening, you know, like, oh, there has been a lot of stuff going on, not to my advantage already in the past few days or weeks.
Absolutely, yeah. What's very important to understand as a consequence is that every corporation that you read in the news where ransomware is being there, and maybe you think of that in the future when you read that again, that is the last step. And that organization didn't have the cognitive or technical capabilities over weeks, months, maybe even years or decades to detect the attacker earlier.
Yeah.
These people have been in the systems for quite a long time, and the ransom is just the last thing.
When they decide, I do not get any more money out of that, where the other topics, it's just the exclamation mark in the end. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's some things to digest, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you need to change the point of view on things, and I love to reflect why things are the way they are, and also discuss that with experts and peers. Agree on that. And yes, I mean, this is how the monkey story in general came up, and nobody ever said anything against it. So it was like silent, yes, you are right at that point. But sometimes you can also discuss it, and especially that ransomware part. This is something so obvious when you just think logically behind that. Sometimes it's also a bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, but as you said and stated in our conversation in the beginning, one of the problem also definitely is that when you are attacked, you do not go out immediately into the public, or you do not go into the public at all. Yeah, because this is embarrassing. Yeah, it shows vulnerability, and and this kind of, let's say, reclusiveness of that information leads, of course, to the outside world thinking like, oh, this doesn't really happen so often, and so on. Yeah, because it's not completely in the news all the time, and so on. Of course, it is in the news, and you know about things are happening. Yeah, but it's not something that everybody immediately goes outside. So, do you think this kind of managing that in that reclusive way is the wrong thing to do? Would you wish we would talk more often about something which is almost a taboo topic, like, hey, I've been hacked, yeah, or I have been victim of cyber criminality? Would this make things better because it raises awareness?
Yes, I believe so. And that is also one of the reasons why we built up the No Monkey Academy, because we believe that more people on this planet need to understand SAP from a security and compliance perspective. You have those heterogeneous skill sets. I mentioned them with the monkeys between SAP, IT security, and audit. And when they communicate among each other, it's like a German talking with an Indian in the native language.
Yeah.
That is overseeable how much content will really stick to it or what makes sense. So they all have stakes in that game, and they need to bring in what is important for them and also convert that into a holistic strategy which covers people, processes, and technology. And don't leave anything out, because security, and that's the beauty and also horrible thing at the same time, is only as strong as the weakest part of the link. Yeah. So 100% security is an illusion. That is impossible. But what you need to do is get as close as possible to the 100% to make it as unattractive as possible to be a victim for attackers. Yeah, well, as we said earlier. And the fact that you don't read a lot about SAP being breached in the press is, like you said, first of all, nobody's proud of it. When you get hacked. Yeah, this is nothing to shine. And also, by the way, from an internal view, a lot of people think SAP is secure by default, and they think that SAP is doing a good job, and yeah, it might be safe, and nothing happened so far. I always, if nothing happened. Just because you don't have the capabilities to detect attackers. But they say, yeah, but nothing happened so far. Yeah, this won't be obvious. Yeah, the attack won't be obvious. And at a certain point in time, poof, encrypted. Yeah, then we are at that point. At that point again. Also forensics and detecting, monitoring mechanisms. If they are not in place, you cannot find the attacker or where it is. So you have to do your homework. And why is it not often in the press? I was asked also by several newspapers if I could give them a reference of a CIO or a CISO who wants to talk about that. There are enough companies who got pawned in SAP, but nobody really officially wants to talk about that. I wasn't successful in giving someone to the press who really openly wanted to state what happened.
Yeah, and probably, and you may correct me with that. And like I said, there are so many factors with people, process, and technology, but also, of course, how you set up the system. The software is the one side, yeah, but the implementation, the surrounding, the environment, who you're communicating to, and so on, is another topic, which of course plays into the security level or safety level that you have with your operations. The OEM can invest as much as you want in the security if it's badly implemented. Yeah, there will be points of attack or leaks or whatever, of course, happening more easily than if you do it properly. How much do you see, if you would, let's say, comment or rate on the security competency of SAP implementation partners? Yeah, because the focus is always in the one who manufactures the software. Sometimes the implementation partners are overlooked. How much do you see the competence of SAP implementation partners in that respect?
Allow me to answer that with a counter question, Alex.
Yeah.
How many people do you know, and I know you know a lot of people, who understand SAP in the context of cybersecurity and compliance? That is an issue because we have 450,000 SAP customers worldwide who are all facing the same challenge. But who should help them? Who can help them? And allow me to take a transformation into the cloud as an example. Yeah, where security sometimes is a topic, sometimes not at all, sometimes at the end. But this is a perfect example because you need to include security right at the beginning in the design phase, before you even release your tender. Because no SI in the world will proactively push that topic in. Why? It requires very seldom skilled people who have exactly that combined knowledge. It costs money. It costs time. It is a potential threat for the overall project. It blows up the project also cost-wise, which might fear them that they will not be recognized in the bid or be kicked out. And then it simply won't happen. So if it's not defined in the design phase, in the requirements that they have to answer on it, it simply won't happen. And what then happens usually is, we will do a penetration test at the end of the project, short before end. And then the pen test is deeply read, full of vulnerabilities. And what typically then happens is someone has to be guilty. Who's guilty for that? I don't know why that is so typical in our society. Because again, the attacker doesn't care who's guilty or who's not guilty at that point. But then you have the issue. But when you see it in a different way, you're moving from on-premise into the cloud. This is the ultimate chance to get rid of dirty code, of unused programs, of whatever. Why would you transport vulnerabilities out of your old world in your new world? You don't do that in your private life as well.
That's a extremely well-spoken point, because I argument the same whenever customers tend to say like, okay, we want to keep costs down, and they say we want to keep risks down, and risk is a huge argument for them to take the old stuff with them, because they say it's proven in their perspective. Because they say like, we've worked with them for 20 years without getting killed, bankrupt, or whatever. So it's proven. That's their point of saying like why we should take this with us. While in reality and so on, this legacy is always your strategy from 20 years ago implemented with the technology from 20 years ago. And as such, of course, you bring maybe like a defense line which is 20 years old and was maybe formed for the threats of 20 years ago. You bring into a world which has become much more risky and much more dangerous. And definitely one of the big weaknesses, and I'm quite a hard critic of the way that RFPs, tenders, and so on are done in our times. The whole process, like when a company says, like, okay, I want to have, of course, a new SAP system and so on, and then those RFPs are done with where somebody else is maybe doing like these kind of phase zero consultancies are making a concept, and this concept then is put into an RFP. And when security is placed in there as a clear requirement, which is not all the time happening, to be honest, I see it in the most cases as either they consider this as it's automatically in there, like we said in the beginning, or they do not really state it proficiently because they think of, the IT partner will definitely think about that. Yeah. And in the end, you have a case like, and I have exactly. They hope. And I have had many cases where you isolated then discuss with the procurement organizations about a tender or an offer. And they want, of course, to have things cut out because you're too expensive. Like change management is one of the first victims, yeah, and so on. And we also had the case of like security was requested to be cut out. And you then get into this kind of situation you have to discuss with a procurement person who is definitely proficient in these kind of things, but they aren't the persons you should discuss the necessity of security in that. And they probably should not be the one who decide about that. But in reality, it happens so often. Yeah.
I see that, and that is actually frustrating. That sometimes you do tenders and you even help defining them and you give the best possible reply. And at the end, sit in front of a procurement person who has no clue about why this is important, how it needs to be implemented, and what are the consequences of not doing it. But just for individual KPIs or whatever reasons, they cut it out and say no. Or we go. I see that quite often when we do pen tests as well. A lot of companies have their regular pen tester who they use since 20, 30 years, and they do their annual stuff and always the same checks and everything, and they stick with them. It's comfy for the people who deal with them because they know what to expect, no surprises or whatever, but this is not why you do a pen test. When you do a penetration test, you want to have the best attackers possible shooting at your system. And if they cannot go in, you can go back to sleep or do the monkeys. Then it's all fine. Yeah. But doing the same thing and same procedures year by year. And we also did that. There was a company where we did 5 years in a row the pen test on the same system. And every year we found the same vulnerabilities. And then you really question yourself, why am I doing that? Yeah, I can do it for money. Yeah, we're getting paid for it. But does that make any sense?
Yeah,
not really.
Definitely.
So they always need to think about why I do things in security. What is my motivation? What is my goal? How can I fulfill that? And how can I measure also progress? And that is super, super important to also make it visible for the people who do not stick into that topic in depth, like procurement, but also a senior management, for example.
And definitely we do not want to blame procurement for vulnerabilities of companies and so on. They have their pressure too, and then these things happening. But it shows that, as you said, this has to be a top-down topic. This has to be on the agenda of the board. This has to be probably not even just a CIO topic, but a CEO topic who is responsible for the company running. When you say we are having
even the advisory board companies, I had contact to advisory boards who identified SAP as a critical backbone for their companies, and they wanted to supervise if the board is taking notice of that and taking action. So
that's a good point.
Sometimes, just to add
that's a good point. Yeah, no, absolutely agree. That's a great point, which makes things clear. But when we talk about the 3 columns, people, processes, and technology, what is your let's say, best-in-class way to build up based on these three parameters, areas of attack? Let's say best possible, I'm not really sure if system is the right word for it, maybe a regime, for security within a company.
So first of all, governance. Who's responsible for what? Do people know that they are responsible, and not only on paper? Are they aware that they carry that responsibility? And do they have the skills to fulfill that responsibility? Super important. We created in an open source project at OWASP a matrix which actually defines the areas of the NIST cybersecurity framework, so the language that IT security people speak, with the SAP terminology. We call it IPAC, that's Integration, Platform Access, Customization. And there you have a matrix which you can use because there's actually no standard for SAP security established. And within that matrix, you can actually check which areas are covered or not. And again, security as strong as the weakest part of the chain, you then see your weak spots in terms of governance, skills, whatever is there. You can use that as a red line guiding you through a security project. Now, what is the first step that you do? First of all, you need to understand your risk. Because only when you understand your risk, you can decide if you either accept it or if you need to tackle it. And therefore, it's important to reflect, okay, which are the really most critical systems for me in a company? Do I have the visibility into it to rate if I need to accept the risk or if I need to tackle it? And that is why it's so important to have evidence and get out of the theoretical talking about things, coulda, woulda, shoulda, as we always say, and get the real hard evidence. That evidence should then be discussed among those three lines of defense and the C-level, because the C-level is liable in latest consequence. Also, from a compliance perspective, we will now have some new laws like NIS 2, for example, coming up, where the C-level in latest consequence is also having personal liability. And the game changer at this part is that the D&O insurances that usually help them and protect them, for example, with GDPR and all that stuff, are explicitly excluded. So it's really a personal liability. And now think, we have an SAP customer not far away from Heidelberg, a chemical company. When there is a cyber attack or the SAP systems just simply stand still, it costs them 20 million an hour.
Yeah.
An hour. With the consequence that there's traffic jam on the German Autobahn because no truck will enter the property, no truck will leave the property, and in between, production is also not happening. Yeah. So that leads to those massive numbers of 20 million an hour. And that happens a few times a year. Yeah. So this is impressive. And now imagine you are liable for that amount of money and you have to pay it out of your own pocket.
Yeah, definitely. But talking about governance, that's I think that's the first step. If you do not have the governance applied, if you do not have the ownership applied, the ownership of the C-level, which is, by the way, in many cases, the beginning and the end of things, like in transformation and successful transformation and so on. And as such, it also is in security. Then, of course, you go nowhere. Definitely. Imagine now you have somebody who where the coin dropped and so on, who has understood this. Say like, hey, Jochen, build me that best-in-class regime.
Yeah.
What would he get?
So, as I said, first of all, we try to define the status quo. What is your current existing attack surface? And derived from these results, we can see, okay, we can prioritize a little bit. Do we have to look at code? Do we have to look at configuration? Is it roles and authorizations? Is it interfaces? What needs to be done? What can we do? to minimize that. We speak of a get clean and stay clean phase. What can be done to prioritize and get clean of those vulnerabilities? How can we shrink that number? But also, we don't want to have that the bathtub runs full of vulnerabilities again. So we need to establish a stay clean strategy. And everything I just said is always covering all three attack vectors: people, processes, and technology. So we also need to see, for example, when we talk about people, what can we do that they produce, for example, better coding, that they have coding guidelines, that they are being lived, and that they are also being reviewed. And also, for example, when third parties deliver external coding, who's checking that coding before it's being implemented into production or the other systems? Also, transports, for example, who checks the ports before they get important?
What's in there?
Very malicious things in there, Easter eggs or whatever, and then you're done. Simple as that. So we have to also make sure that the people are a very, very important part in that entire game. 90% of all the attacks, successful attacks, are due to human errors, not technical errors. And that's why the leverage with people is a very, very strong one. So they need to be skilled, trained, they need the awareness, and then they can do a better job. And they need to understand themselves as that important puzzle piece, carrying corporate responsibility, every single person who works with that. And that's why we say we need to establish a security culture. And culture always starts with people, not with technology. The second part is processes. What are my processes? Do I have, like, for example, I mentioned development guidelines. Yeah, are they in place? Are they being lived? What is in general my process within SAP? And is security a big part of it? And lastly, you have technologies. Here, I want to make an important statement. Also to the people who say SAP is secure. In general, you can say the standard of SAP that is being delivered from Waldorf is quite secure because it has a lot of QA processes. They are scanning the code. They do that. There are a lot of quality gates. But who only uses the standard? I haven't seen a single SAP system where only the standard is being used. And every modification, every customization, this is where the human part kicks in because this is being done by people. And if they don't have the skills, or they do it, or they are tired, or whatever is the root cause for it, you have your vulnerability. And that's why it's super, super important to have the holistic entire view on the application covering all three attack vectors.
So fit to standard, ironically, and I guess nobody really sees that under that kind of light, is also something, for security reason, which makes actually a lot of sense.
Yeah, and to complete your question, how to do that, there is not a standard way or scheme F what you need to do. This will always be individual, and we always so have to be a bit flexible and adapt to the circumstances that a customer has. But derived from that evidence, we can read a lot and give recommendations. It's also depending on the budget, on the risk appetite. What is your risk appetite? Is it 2 out of 10? Is it 6 out of 10? Is it 8 out of 10? What do you want to achieve? With that risk appetite, this has impact on the budget that is needed, for example, for training, process optimization. If you want to use tools, for example, to have an easier life, to connect, for example, your IT security department to SAP, and also enable the IT security team to understand log files out of SAP, to create play and run books, to be able to do incident response. What are we doing? Again, think it from the end. What will happen? Yeah. So there are so many puzzle pieces to complete the picture that are necessary, which you need to know. And this is where you have expert advice. You can use ChatGPT and read and do and stuff. But however, the real life experience is quite important on how to deal with things, because it's also always a political game as well within those companies. Nobody wants to lose the face, and as we said, nobody is proud of vulnerabilities that might have been existed over years.
Yeah, and I think what also people quite underestimate, security is a capability. And whenever you want your organization to become better at a certain capability or get a certain capability, this is change. You need change management. And as such, of course, it is the human component of having somebody who really takes care, not only just by saying like, okay, I asked ChatGPT, now I make out of that a PowerPoint, and maybe I made 2 or 3 security trainings, and that's it. This is definitely nothing which complies with that principle and brings change and security to your organization. It's a whole different game that's happening there.
Yeah, and change management is super important. As I said, security is culture. You need to establish that mindset also with the people, that every single individuum carries corporate responsibility. And if they just don't care, security is always an invest. Yeah. And you don't know when it pays back. That's why I also avoid calculating business cases for security investments. This doesn't make sense. This is not serious. Yeah. It's more like an insurance. You have to do it. You don't know if you need it. Ideally, you don't. But in case something happens, you want to be prepared and minimize the damage. And that is super, super important to understand. That security, first of all, is an invest. During the pandemic, for example, Alex, people say, "Oh, now is your time," because people are not working in the walls of the corporation anymore. Everybody's from home. There's a huge attack surface and everything. The truth was very different. The truth was that corporations cut off all projects which don't bring them any return on invest. And the first things that have been cut off was security and training. Complete opposite of what people think why it should be good, for example, for No Monkey. Yeah. This was a disaster. I mean, the attackers were like, perfect. Yeah, let's go. Because for them, still, they are out of the firewall, and still, they can be sure that nobody is investing in further security measures at that point. Yeah, that was quite a tough time, which didn't really help in terms of security and compliance. Security is an invest, and this is how it needs to be understood. And the payback will be not being attacked, not being harmed. And we see a lot of companies who got hacked and they learned it, but proactively, only few companies want to do something. There must be an audit, compliance pressure that helps to allocate a budget, or an attack. These are the 2 main drivers.
It's like always, organizations are like humans. Yeah. Sometimes they have to feel the pain and burn their fingers on the heating stove. Yeah. To get the message. But what's definitely different per company is, let's say, the status they're in. Yeah. Some are just at the beginning of a big transformation initiative. Some are maybe within it, just in the middle of it. Some maybe have been finished and now have reached a certain plateau where they want to stay. Probably there is no right or wrong moment to start with that thinking, because every moment should be the right one. But what, of course, could be different, I may consider, is you would probably choose a different approach in those phases. Am I correct, or do you say like there is something which is suitable for everybody?
I think there is no wrong moment to start. This is impossible. When you haven't started, let's start now. The sooner you start, the better it is. So there is no wrong moment at that point. Do it. Go ahead. But also be clear of what your goals are and what you would like to achieve and why you do it. Don't do it just to be compliant because I have to be NIS2 compliant or whatever. That is the wrong motivation to do it. You really need to understand the intrinsic motivation and the importance of SAP systems for your corporation and what is if they are not available? What does that lead? Think it from the end. Again, what does it mean? And I speak quite often with CIOs and CISOs, and as I said, they always throw me arguments of why we cannot do it right now. We cannot block the silos. There's a lot of other priorities. There's no budget being reserved forever. The attacker doesn't care.
Yeah.
This is no argument for the attacker not to attack. I mean, you can do it and discuss that internally why you don't want to do that. But in the end, the consequence is you're being pawned. Yeah. And this is
absolutely
the inconvenient truth. Yeah.
And nobody, to make an analogy, if imagine you're on a journey in your car, 500 kilometers, and 400 kilometers into the journey, you realize, oh, I forgot to buckle up. And you, considering your car has not these kind of beep, 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 who are nobody who is in their sane senses would say like, I just have 100 kilometers left. Does not matter up to buckle up anymore. And I think same is happening here. Yeah, these kinds of principles, the activities, the regimen is your safety belt as a company, because you will be attacked. Or you are attacked and under attack. No question about that. This is actually happening already all the time. It's about getting the right approach to it and surround yourself with the right people who can help yourself. And No Monkey definitely is one of those. When we're looking at the time and coming to an end, what would, in your opinion, be, if you would say, like the 3 most important things people should think about concerning security, but unfortunately do not do? What are these 3 things, or the 3 misconceptions? If you would wrap it up.
First of all, SAP cybersecurity is by far more than roles and authorizations. Very, very important, because roles and authorizations is what we see. I would say of these 450,000 companies worldwide using SAP, not even 5,000 have gone beyond roles and authorizations. And that is very, very critical in general. Secondly, understand your risk. Understand the status quo and also understand the motivation why security is important. Also, security versus compliance. I give you an example. You're compliant when you have a seatbelt in your car. You're only secure when you also wear it.
Absolutely.
And that is important, that they don't only buy tools for the sake of having bought a tool, that they also understand why they buy a tool and how to get the maximum use out of it, how you enable the people and build the bridge also among departments in terms of governance and have communication, regular communication, to be able to see also from different perspectives in case something happens. Hey, why is it that way? What can be done? What are our plans? And lastly, again, think it from the end. Think it from the end. Understand what would be the impact of doing monkey business. Think what would be the consequence and what you can do to avoid that. There are experts out there who can help you. Nobody needs to reinvent the wheel new. There is a dynamic now also with AI, which is not only good for defense, it's first of all a major advantage for attackers, because it's much easier for them to get information, to aggregate that and just go forward. So AI won't solve that. It's more, it will increase the attacks, and maybe it will help in detecting and monitoring stuff and interpreting over time. There will be stuff happening, but it won't solve the issue. So don't let AI be your hope, and hope not a strategy.
Exactly, definitely. Jochen, you've been around in the last weeks quite a lot with DSHE and so on. When people want to meet you within the next months, where are good places to do that besides maybe Eintracht Frankfurt home games?
I'm based and located like CBS in Heidelberg. I'm traveling the world. I'm speaking a lot on various events, not only in Germany. That's also important for me. Why No Monkey communicates in English, because we are not addressing a German problem. We are addressing a global challenge that is there. So that is why No Monkey is working in Australia as well as in Mexico and other parts of the world. So feel free to reach out. We usually immediately sign a mutual NDA to also be able to speak a bit more open. That is very important, and also that allows us to give more information and guidance to our customers. We try to listen a lot. We don't, as I said, go a scheme F. We try to understand the customer, raise the questions that are important to then also work within the barriers that a customer sets. If there is no budget or if there are no resources who can help out internally when they are blocked, we try to find the best possible way to realize security and compliance in SAP. But that's why it's super important also to listen. And we do those discovery calls. We do them totally free of charge, where we understand the status quo, and there we can give first advice for the first 1, 2, 3 steps on how to move forward. We can demonstrate how we would approach that in detail, and then at least the customer would be at that point where they can decide, I accept the risk, which is totally valid, or I need to tackle it. And when they want to tackle it, it's important to do the right things in the right priority, because right things in the wrong priority also don't really make sense when it comes to security. And this is where we can handheld and guide the customers on that journey with our best practices and experience of over 15 years in that area.
Jochen, thank you very much. It was scary and exciting in both dimensions. Really learned a lot again, and I'm sure our listeners too. Thank you very much for taking your time. And pleasure. I'm looking again forward to our next conversation. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Alexander. Thank you for the invitation. All the best.